Okay, thank you as well. Good afternoon. My name is Pim van der Eyck. I have been working with the CEF team on their AS4 technical specification work for some time. I've also been working on the standardization of AS4 itself. I'm one of the editors of the specification. And what we have done in the CEF narrow down AS4 to be type AS4 is a standard, and also eDelivery is a technical specification. It is not a product, although there are products that implement it. It's not. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you well, Tim.
Okay, I see some comments in the chat.
There are some errors while you speak, but now it's okay.
Okay. Okay, so AS4 is a technical specification. There are multiple implementations of it, and typically solution providers, software companies, or companies specific to particular industries package the AS4 functionality in components, and those components are then used by end users that want to connect, for instance, to the EPREL database using AS4 machine-to-machine communication. So all the technical details, all the technical complexity also of AS4 is typically hidden within those components, which for you is the component that you integrate your system with. So if you have a system that has these models and data that you want to upload, your interface is the interface of the AS4 component, which is typically a very simple interface, and all the complexity of AS4, including all its security, is handled by the component. So if you go to the next slide, please. The reason is that eDelivery is using existing technical specifications and standards. It's not trying to reinvent the wheel of secure communication. This has been done in standards organizations, and eDelivery builds on the results of that standardization work. And also it uses AS4, and we'll get to that in the other slides of my presentation, because of an evaluation that was done in other projects on technologies to use, on standards to use. And AS4 was selected as the standard to use for this functionality. So here on the right, you see a list of components. Together, these are components of eDelivery. The topic for today is mostly the component at the top of this list, the access point component. That is the component that does the AS4 secure communication for you. And what eDelivery provides is a set of specification. It's called the eDelivery AS4 profile that describes in detail how to configure an AS4 software product to become an eDelivery AS4 access point that is able to communicate with the EPREL system. Access points and AS4 use certificates to secure messages. So there are standards from the ETSI standards body that describe how certificates work. There are also other components that are on this page on the right, the service metadata locator and metadata publisher. These are used in some of the domains that were introduced before, for instance, by the e-invoicing domain. we won't get in the details of those. They're complementary to the access point component and therefore can be used in conjunction with AS4, but they are not mandatory. And I'm not aware of their need to be used in EPREL, maybe or maybe not. So indeed, it's not relevant for you. So we will not cover them today. We will focus on AS4. So if you go to the next slide, please. As already was mentioned by one of the people who ask questions, there are more protocols in the world to do data exchange. AS4 is not the only or the first solution. And this slides will explain to you the overall benefits of AS4, which were the motivation for previous projects that actually did an evaluation of those various options to select AS4. So this part of the presentation will be covered in actually 3 sections. The general benefits section is about AS4 in general, so it's not specific to eDelivery use of AS4. It covers all potential applications of AS4, but they are very generic, so they definitely do apply to eDelivery and also to your domain. Then there are some specific benefits of our eDelivery AS4 profile. As mentioned, CEF provides detailed technical specifications on how to use the AS4 standard in eDelivery. So there are specific choices have been made on how AS4 should be implemented. And then also in the last section, some comparative benefits. So how does eDelivery AS4 relate to other data exchange approaches that we have seen in other European projects? So on the next slide, we will first go to the general benefits. Starting with the specification. So AS4 is an OASIS standard. It is not something that was invented by the Commission. So it is not tied to a particular group of users. It's a generic communication standard developed within the OASIS standards organization. OASIS develops technical specification for data exchange. It's an international organization, and AS4 is one of the standards that is produced by OASIS. OASIS is also on track to become an ISO standard. We are working on that at the moment with the ISO Secretariat. That means that it can also be referenced in procurement. Projects can actually mandate, and also EU directives can reference AS4 if it's an ISO standard. It's a free standard, so the specification of AS4 is available for free on the internet. You as end users are not the audience of the AS4 specification. That is the specification that should be read by the people that build those AS4 components, those access points that you in your organizations then deploy. And they provide you a simpler interface, so this C1 to C2 interface that Joao showed in this 4-corner diagram, and also the C3, C4 on the other side. So the interfaces between your own system and the AS4 access point are specific to the component and much simpler than the AS4 exchange, which
I don't know if other people have the same problem, but I'm having some issues in the audio. Maybe due to your connection. I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, so we can go on. I
Okay.
see that some people say it's fine for them. Okay, perfect.
Okay, so this covers the specification aspect of AS4. If you go to the next slide, payloads. This is actually a feature of AS4 that it is not tied to any particular data type. So some protocols are specific to, for instance, XML or textual data. AS4 can transport any type of data, be it XML, binary, JSON, whatever. It can actually even transport multiple combinations of payloads. So you might have some structured data as XML and some binary data such as PDF or another binary format for your model data. Since this data may be large, so if you have a lot of data to send, AS4 provides a built-in compression feature, which has a number of benefits. First of all, it means there's less data to upload, but it also speeds up the security processing of the AS4 component. Remember, all that data has to be encrypted and signed. If there's less data to encrypt and sign, the component works more efficiently. And also, AS4 has no theoretical limit on size, on message size. So we have tested it with multi-gigabyte payloads. So in practice, there's no limitation. There's no limitation on the amount of data that you can send. So I see a question that people are asking is, well, what is eDelivery and what is AS4 and how do they relate to each other? So eDelivery is the broader concept of secure data exchange. It's not, as a concept, it is not linked to any particular standard. However, in the CEF program, specific choices have been made for protocols, and for the aspect of secure data exchange, the AS4 standard has been selected. So AS4 is a general standard. It's not designed for or by the Commission. Other domains use it too. In other parts of the world, they use it. In theory, you could do secure data exchange with different protocols, but to support implementation, specific choices have been made, and that's first of all the choice for AS4 as a standard. And having selected AS4, also additional implementation guidelines have been developed by the CEF program, and that's actually information that you can download from the CEF website. So for EPREL, when your solution provider wants to implement AS4 for use in eDelivery, they would need two things. First of all, they need an AS4 component. They can get an existing one which implements the OASIS AS4 standard, and then they need to implement the specific guidelines that are needed to connect to the Commission to the EPREL database. And that is information that you can get from the CEF website. Okay, if you go to the next slide. Message metadata. This is actually an area where AS4 has some advantages over AS2, which was mentioned by one of the people who asked questions. So AS2 is really a fairly low-level, simple protocol in the sense that you can send data, and that's basically it. The metadata for an AS2 message are limited to to the sender and the recipient. So there's only two headers, basically, in an AS2 message. AS4 has a richer set of metadata, so there are more header fields which you can use for a number of purposes. There are the party identifiers, but there's also fields that you can use to identify a particular service. So in many exchanges, parties offer multiple services. So to make sure the message is handled by the appropriate service, you can use the service header field to identify the service that is responsible for processing the message. AS4 has also standardized headers for message identification, and these identifiers can be used for correlation as well. So if you send a message and there's a later message that is a response to that message, AS4 has identifier headers that allow you to correlate the responses to requests. And this is also an advantage over AS2. In AS4, basically, there's only one-way notification style data exchanges. In AS4, that is an option, but you can also have request-response style exchanges that you may be familiar with from web services or other API-style data exchanges. You can also correlate groups of messages that are part of a shared conversation as a conversation identifier. And you can attach custom ad hoc properties to a message. This may be needed to automate some automated processing. For instance, if you have some data that is not in your actual XML payload data, but that is needed to allow the message to be processed, you can use message properties to do that. Whether this is actually needed for EPREL would need to be decided at a later stage when the detailed guidelines for the access using eDelivery to EPREL are to be designed. You can, in addition to message properties, can also define additional properties for each of the message parts. So an AS4 message can have one part, or it can have multiple parts. And if there's different properties that apply to the different parts in the message, then you can define those for each of the parts individually. Again, whether this is needed in specific cases is to be decided on a case-by-case data on a basis. And overall, AS4 supports the widest range of data exchanges. So it supports the traditional document-oriented or electronic data interchange style exchanges, but it also supports more service-oriented exchanges. So in that sense, it's a very flexible standard that can be used to support a wide range of exchanges. And actually, that's what we see. As Joao mentioned, AS4 and eDelivery are used in a wide range of domains. Some are more traditional EDI style exchanges, and some are more service-oriented exchanges. And so we have a single solution that supports those different styles of data exchange. If you go to the next slide, security. This is actually one of the reasons why that Joao also mentioned why AS4 has been selected for use in eDelivery. As everyone knows, security is high on the priority list of users, since we've seen a number of catastrophic cases where information was leaked. So AS4 is really very supports high-end options for message security. It has mechanisms to support the integrity of messages, so it can sign messages, and this makes sure that the recipient knows the message has not been tampered with. And this message signature also provides non-repudiation of origin. So if you get a message from a counterparty, the counterparty cannot deny having sent that message because their signature is on that message. AS4 also supports confidentiality protection. So it does that actually at multiple layers. So AS4 uses WS security and XML encryption from web services to encrypt the message parts. So the payloads that are exchanged are encrypted using certificates. And in addition, it can run over HTTPS, so secure HTTP, using transport layer security. So no third parties that are not authorized to see the contents of your message can access it. Similarly, AS4 has a built-in receipt mechanism, and those receipts also refer to the structure of the message that they relate to and the signature of the message that they relate to. So when you send a message and they send you a receipt, they cannot deny having received that message from you, and they cannot claim that they received a different message than, or a message with different content than you sent them. Furthermore, AS4 has mechanisms for authorization, so you can define who your partners are, your communication partners, using various configuration options. So you can also control which services you offer to which partner, for instance. And the XML encryption and XML security toolkits that are by AS4 are really state-of-the-art. So they provide support for state-of-the-art algorithms, which were actually also reviewed by information security experts at the Commission. There's an agency called ENISA, which supports the Commission and Member States in information security matters. They give lists of recommended algorithms. So AS4 does not mandate any particular algorithm, but the AS4 toolkits support those state-of-the-art algorithms. And the selection of the specific algorithms is part of our AS4 eDelivery profiling, which is the second part of these three sets of benefits slides. But we'll first finish the overall AS4 benefits. So if you go to the next slides, please. Reliable messaging. This is also an area where AS4 differs from and improves on a lot of other older data exchange protocols. In the real world, communication is not always perfect. Actually, some of you have audio problems with me, so we know that sometimes networks are imperfect. This is also the case with data exchange, with messaging. So the server of your counterparty may not be available at a particular point in time, or your server may be down for some time. In simple protocols, this means errors, so failure to deliver messages, failure to send messages. AS4 has a built-in reliable messaging protocol, which provides a robust recovery from network failures or system failures using a retry mechanism. So this is all configurable, the number of retries and the interval of retries. But in practice, for short interruptions in networks or in systems, this system will automatically recover from unavailability by sending the message again and again until at some point a receipt has been returned that confirms the correct reception of the message. On the receiver side, since messages may be sent more than once because of this retry mechanism, there is a need to eliminate duplicates. So this is to make sure that the message is delivered at most once, whereas the retry mechanism make sure it is sent at least once. So those two together mean that you get once and only once guaranteed delivery of messages. And this is all done by the AS4 component. So if you deploy one of the AS4 solutions that will be mentioned later, or any other ones that are conform to the specification, they handle this for you. You just hand over your data to the component, to the access point, request it to be sent, and the component will make sure that it will be sent, perhaps not immediately if there's some interruption, but eventually it will be sent. Okay, if you go to the next slide, please. So on implementation aspects of AS4, and this is actually also an area where AS4 was an improvement over other protocols that were considered in European projects prior to CEF eDelivery. AS4 is built on state-of-the-art technologies, so it uses XML, web services, web and internet technologies and standards. So if you compare that to, for instance, AS2, AS2 is a specification that was developed at the end of the previous century. So in many of these areas, it is built on older technologies. There are also multiple implementations of AS4, and these cover both closed source implementations from software vendors as well as open source implementations. And both the closed source and the open source implementations have been deployed successfully in production. Some of these companies also offer the ability to deploy your AS4 solutions in the cloud. In that case, you don't have to deploy their software in your own organization. Instead, you connect to them on the cloud. This may be the case if you already have your own IT infrastructure running in the cloud. The cloud service provider may also offer AS4 for you, or have a way to deploy AS4 for you. And finally, AS4 is programming language independent, so it is not limited to any particular programming language. From our own experience with different projects, we have seen implementations in at least 4 languages already, and there's no limitation to those 4. This is the choice of the developer, which language they use. Also, some products are really out-of-the-box complete products. Other vendors offer more like components, like Java components or .NET components. So if you then have your own business application, you then have the option to provide a kind of a built-in AS4 access point functionality by embedding that component within your own application. So there's a wide range of options: closed source, open source, cloud, on-premise, components, or standalone product implementations. And we have seen all of those with AS4. And which one is suited for you is, of course, a question that every organization has to answer themselves. So, next slide, please. Also, AS4 is a very configurable protocol. It defines the set of configuration parameters to use, which means that you can basically get a different behavior by using a different set of parameters rather than having to change a computer program. So if you could go to the next slide, please. This previous slides covered things that are true of AS4 in general. As mentioned, in addition to referencing the AS4 standard, eDelivery also provides its own set of implementation guidelines. And these guidelines further narrow down the options of AS4 with the goal to simplify configuration. So it means you don't have to get any AS4 expertise just to implement AS4. Basically, this profile gives you a predefined set of options, and these options are the ones to be used. And if you implement those options, your product will work with the EPREL database. The specific choices that were made in these guidelines are based on the experience in the various projects that preceded CEF, and they have also been validated in production use in various domains. So this is a set of proven options. We provide 2 layers of security, so it's not just HTTPS. We also provide message level signing and encryption. So this provides a redundant additional layer of security. We want this system to be secure from the start. We don't have to change our eDelivery guidelines a few years now because of we find the world is scarier than it is today. We want to make sure it's really thoroughly secure, so we can use it confidently. In these implementation guidelines, as I mentioned before, AS4 has an option to use a variety of security algorithms. The ones we use were reviewed by information security experts, and they are deemed sufficient for at least 10 years of future systems use. So there's no need there's no anticipated need to change to different algorithms within the next decade, essentially. We also know that for this set of parameters, there are multiple conformant implementations. We will mention that later. We also do conformance testing. So users have a choice. You can, and what solution is best for you may have a different answer for different users. And by using this fixed set of implementation guidelines, we can make sure okay, so I need to speed up. So this is actually the advantage of the AS eDelivery profile. So I think if you go to the next slide briefly. So this is the reason why, basically summarizing why AS4 was used rather than other protocols. So it's a state-of-the-art protocol. It is indeed new, but this has the advantage that it's really secure and can be used in confidence for the next decade. It supports a wide range of options, and there's a wide range of implementation options. So I'll now pass the floor to Adrien.